our species thrives for hundreds of thousands of years. This shift towards hyper-intellectualization has disconnected us from our true essence as living, breathing human beings. So I believe that there needs to be a radical shift back towards being earthy, having our feet firmly on the ground, getting out of the clouds a little bit and back into our heaven, which is earth. This is the only heaven that we know for a fact, that we can feel, that we can see, that we can collectively affect here and now. And movement is that. Physical activity is that.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Movement and Performance Podcast, where it is my goal to help people get active and to connect with their body. Today I have with me Ronny Rodriguez, and we'll be talking about the value of embodiment as a tool to live more completely. To lay the foundation, we're going to start the conversation with physical literacy. Let's get right into it. Can you give me a little definition of what is physical literacy? And why do you think it's important for people to know what physical literacy is?
Awesome, thank you, Anthony. I love to always answer that question with the International Physical Literacy Association's definition, which is that physical literacy is the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engaging in physical activities for life. In essence, is an attitude from inception, from birth, through the end of one's life that allows one to engage in physical activity with the knowledge, understanding that it is worth the investment in time and effort and energy, that it is something that is integral to what it means to be a human being, and that it allows us to connect with one another and the environment in a way that truly exemplifies our embodied aspect of our existence, or in other words, our body and its connection to the earth and things around us.
So like why do you think it would be important for all people to understand that, know what that means, embody it in their life? Is that just something for physical educators, or is it for everybody in the world?
Is 100% for every human being. If you are a human being and you are alive, this is important for you. Especially if you are a human being, which the vast majority of us live in developed countries, where there has taken a certain view and attitude towards movement that has been detrimental to the overall development of the individual in terms of, and some of the symptoms that we see from what I'm speaking of is increase in sedentarism across the world, increase in obesity across the world. So it's important for everyone to understand the importance of physical literacy because it relates to their well-being and their ability to interact with the world in a meaningful way, in a way that's meaningful to them regardless of where they are in the world or what culture they belong to. What that has an effect on, it's the activities, the environments, and the situations that you're going to be in. Each country takes on a different take depending on what's available to you. But at the core of it, the human being has to be physically active in order to fully reach their potential and be their full selves. Everything that we do is mitigated through movement. So as much as our societies have tried to put one aspect of our existence, the cognitive aspect, the mental aspect, above all others, the more we continue to learn about ourselves as human beings, the more we realize that there is no distinction between mind, body, and environment. It's all one thing. And what we do to one affects the other directly. Physical literacy is important because there has been such a concerted effort to suppress human movement for whatever reason that is in each individual society. But we see its outcomes. Less people are moving, more people are becoming obese. There's less access to activities. So physical literacy as an understanding and more so embodying it is essential for our human flourishing and thriving.
And it's funny, obesity, I think, has taken a big, a big seat in all of this. But I feel like now the trajectory is maybe even going to move towards anxiety and depression, right? Like when people start to realize the connection, so we know that it impacts our body itself, but how is it impacting our brain? How is it making us feel? Like the other day I was sitting on the computer for way too long, and my medicine for myself was going out and playing a game of handball in the park. I felt like I was alive. I didn't know who. At first I just said, I'm going to walk to the park. I'll see who's there, whatever. Then it was a pickup game of handball. But I immediately just like involving my body and being back in the world for a minute. Like it was a way to like engage with the actual world. Like I'm sitting there in my head all day on a computer, and I started to feel the effects of it. And I think there's a huge problem with kids on cell phones nowadays, too much technology, people being in isolation, and movement has this like huge impact to be able to help with things like the technology time and the social isolation. And so when it comes to anxiety, depression, and then even cognitive abilities, how well we do function. So in that moment where I'm working on the computer and I start to burn out, like how effective am I really going to be? I feel like I focus and do much better or have more to offer after I'm refreshed, and that gives me that refreshment. So, I think it's even more than just that, and it has to do with the brain too. But I just want to also mention a point. So the word literacy, when people hear literacy, they think of reading and writing. And how does that term literacy apply to physical literacy? Because people could still get confused no matter how many times you say it, and I just want to be explicit. So is literacy talking about reading and writing when we say physical literacy, or what exactly does that mean?
So the term literacy itself is our ability to engage with the world. So language literacy is our ability to engage with the world through language manipulation. Physical literacy is our ability to engage with the world through our embodied dimension with our body. For the majority of human existence, we have intrinsically been movement beings. We have lived in a way that we had to move in order to eat, in order to survive, in order to find shelter. In today's modernized world, where everything can be ordered through a phone, movement has taken a back seat to intellectualism. It leaves us feeling depleted, because when we are only moving in our mind, engaging with these technologies, our body is left with all of this energy that it has not spent. And in a way, it becomes destructive to our well-being. So this is why when we spend many hours on screens, TVs, we feel depleted. We're not fully engaging with the world. We're engaging with only one dimension of our existence. When we are engaged in physical activity, we are using our entire being. Our cognitive functions are awakened, our emotional faculties are awakened, and our intellectual faculties are also awakened. Because now we have to holistically engage with the activity that we're doing. Some of the things that modernity has promoted leave us feeling disembodied, where we're constantly only using our intellectual faculties. Physical literacy just essentially means that you are in tune with yourself to the extent that you feel motivated to move, that you're confident about the movement choices that you're making, that you can engage in those activities in a skillful manner that allows you to have fun, joy, find meaning, interact with it safely, and that you know how to do certain things that can improve your performance, improve your interaction in that activity, your connection with other human beings, the understanding that involves knowing the rules and etiquette that each physical activity, discipline, sport, event entails. So say all of that to say, yes, the term literacy can be confusing because it was predominantly used in the language arts or mathematic, literacy, math literacy. But there is also physical literacy and many other literacies. So it's just a capability that human beings have. We have the capability to be highly physically literate beings, given the right conditions and attitude to realize that potential. And that's where societies can do a better part in providing access to all people at every age, every level, every social class. To increase that.
Prioritizing it. And but so you mentioned the piece embodiment, and I know you briefly said the definition, but can you give it to us one more time, because I want to have it in and of itself. So when we say the word embodiment, what does that mean?
So embodiment is referring to our body and the interactions that our body has with the world around us, and the interactions that we have internally, which is our mental capacities, which are themselves derived because we have a body. There cannot be a thinking mind without a body. That which we call thinking is the evolutionary internalization of movement. So even our thinking cannot happen if we didn't have a body. So embodiment is a word that encompasses, essentially it's a holistic word, it encompasses our entire being without separating it from mind, body. So embodiment is our entire thinking, feeling, moving self.
And all
the vehicle is our body.
Right, coming together as one thing, which we'll talk about monism as we go on and all that. But is there anything in the world that has a brain and doesn't move? I think all living things move, right? Anything that has a brain moves. And I wonder, can you make that argument? And I think John Rady from the book Spark, and I could go on and on with him. I actually had him on the episode, but he says that without movement, we won't have a brain.
Right.
And so, understanding that deep connection between the two, and that really they all are kind of one intertwined thing. So I guess that kind of brings us now into the physiological underpinnings of physical literacy. I know there's three big ones. Let me see if I get them. Monism, existentialism, phenomenology.
Boom. Spot on.
It's like I reviewed this beforehand. No. But so monism kind of speaks to that point. Or can you dive into each of those? We'll start with monism first.
Right.
What does that mean? Why did people, and I'm sure we could get into some religious context and a lot of things, why did people have these feelings? Or get into it first and then we'll dive into more later. But what is monism?
So monism as a school of philosophy essentially stated there is one thing. It's, so there is no way for you to truly discern between mind, body, or environment. It's all one thing. So what you can speak to are the different aspects of that one thing, but it is still ultimately one thing. And the more you try to dissect it, the more you see that it's totally intertwined and in essence indissectible. You cannot separate it. You cannot say here starts the body, here is where the mind starts. It's all one system. It all goes together, and it's a totally closed system in the sense of whatever you do to your mind affects your body. Whatever you do to your body affects your mind. The reason for that is that it's one thing. So monism is bringing us to the understanding that there is no division between mind and body. It is one thing. It is the same thing. As opposed to dualism, it has to be brought into that sees two very distinguishable things. That which is mental and that which is physical. And from that perspective, the physical is viewed as being lesser than the mental. Everything is mental. Everything towards the mind. That is the current paradigm in which our societies operate. That is why it is deemed okay to sit a child down in a seat for hours and hours on end, because we're supporting their mental development.
Right.
With the erroneous worldview that there are two separate things, that you can somehow focus on the mind at the expense of the body, and that won't have detrimental effects. So monism is about oneness, in essence.
And would you say that, like, where do you think dualism stemmed from? And like, why would people have that mindset of, I don't know, separating the two? I feel like I remember, and not that we have to get too religious, but it does play a fact, right? So when the higher you go up, I like to think about, you know, things like a pyramid, and at the top of that pyramid is your philosophy in life, right? And your philosophy is then going to dictate everything else. And, you know, philosophy can come in the form of religious, it can come in the form of a variety of different things, but that's going to dictate all the other things that happen at the bottom. So it's not to make it, you know, a whole religious conversation, but it is very important because that's going to shape your philosophy. And I feel like I remember there being, you know, a bit of a connection between, you know, many people would say things like, you know, store up your riches in the heavens, and like the earth is going to deteriorate. Like, you know, there's maybe some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The three religions that are together, if we put them all into one: Judaism, Christianity,
and Islam, the Abrahamic faiths.
Abrahamic faiths, there you go. There's a little bit of that in the Abrahamic faiths, that, you know, the earth is going to deteriorate, store up your riches in the heavens. But, like, you know, are there some connection to that? Is it stemming from somewhere else? What do you think?
100%. I think
Yeah.
Religion has played a major role in human development, and it has, in some eras, helped to flourish human movement, and in some ways it has also stifled it, and stifled the way people connect to their bodies, connect to their sexuality, connect to movement, and things of that nature. So the philosophies of monism, existentialism, and phenomenology were regarded as counter-enlightenment, and a lot of the Enlightenment philosophies and rationalism have to do with Plato and Christianity, and the view of two distinct properties in existence, that being one that is mental and one that is physical. And again, regarding that which we cannot truly interact with, the mental or spiritual or soul, as higher and more important than everything physical. So, your body deteriorates, doesn't matter, because you're going to go on to a magical place where you won't need your body. Oh, you don't want to move? It's okay, as long as you're being a pious person and doing what you need to do within the context of this cultural or religious or philosophical framework, which tells you that it's okay to not develop your body, to reject the physical realm, that there's nothing here on earth that's worth your life. So in essence, it's like a repudiation of our embodiment, a repudiation of our physical reality, and a total exaltation of our internal capacities, which we literally cannot measure. This is why the philosophical underpinnings, in my opinion, are critical to your worldview, which either fosters and internally celebrates movement, your body, its beauty, its prowess, your mind, its connection to the environment, making sure that the environment is thriving so that we can interact. You know, I think it brings our reality back to the here now, as opposed to other philosophies which put your focus in the hereafter.
Yeah. And yeah, not to target necessarily one religion,
No.
and it's not to be offended, because there's many religions who also believe that there's an afterlife, right? And things in that realm, and may have also had similar views and stuff, but it's just more so targeting the philosophy and understanding that. And I think whatever religious background you have, you can still embody different philosophies.
Yes.
You don't have to, you know, it doesn't have to dictate all of that. But there's no doubt that, especially, you know, and science isn't the full answer either, but science definitely points to the fact that these connections are very real. You know, and we can really measure that today, you know, that there is top-down and bottom-up approaches to things. You know, even something as simple as like people have measured breathing, right? And how I can manipulate my breathing, and then that's going to impact my heart rate, and that's going to impact my psychology, that's going to impact how I feel. There's a great book I'm reading called Behave. I bring it up a lot. Robert Sapolsky, amazing neuroscientist, but he talks about how everything from, even from what you're looking at in this moment, you mentioned the piece about your environment, how you can't separate them really. Everything that we do and why we do it stems from either what's happening in your immediate environment. For example, if you see the word violent on the wall, you're more likely to be violent. So just from seeing that, and there's tons of science to back that up. So then they'll go, further. So it's your immediate environment. It's your internal chemistry, where you're feeling. It could be something as simple as you're hungry. They say, a lot of people getting a brain fart. Why am I the person making the judgment? The judge.
Yep.
There's a lot of brain farts today, but the judge will make a more harsh decision when they're hungry. Mm-hmm. So what's your internal chemistry going on, right? Then all the way down to what happened in your childhood. Do you have childhood trauma? Then all the way down to evolutionary, and what were your ancestors? What did they pass on to you? What made them successful in their environment? It comes back to what made you able to survive in your environment, right? So what made them successful in their environment? Was it a winter climate? Was it a mountainous climate? Was it a desert? Was there a lot of food? Was there a little food? And now whatever they had to do to survive was passed down in the DNA. So all the way down from what your ancestors gave you, to what you went through as a kid, to what you're feeling in this moment, or what happened in the past couple months or days, all the way to what I literally see and hear right now. And there's tons of science to back up that interconnectedness with your world and you, and how those things are not really separate, and they can't really be separated. So.
An amazing segue, Brother Anthony, to existentialism. Existentialism, in essence, one of the big tenets within it is that existence precedes essence. And essentially what that means, you are a being in this world before any identity or socially constructed ways of behavior are essentially conditioned into you. You're essentially born in a clean slate to the extent of all of those things that are passed on to you from the environment. And in essence, it is a philosophical school of thought which allows for that further dissection of the interconnectedness of everything. Because within it, in essence, it's bringing us to the fact that who you are is 100% shaped by your environment. Those aforementioned things that you detailed regarding evolution, regarding your ancestors. Also, the context in which your society views how you should move, how you should act, how you should think. All of these things are things that are conditioned into us, but not from some cosmic or ordained way.
Right.
That these are things that we ourselves can control throughout our lives, depending on our ability to assess our environment, remove ourselves from our environment, and shape things to essentially hack our biology and psychology in a sense. But if you come from that philosophical standpoint that that's even possible, that allows you to live in that way. But if you come from a understanding at the basis that that's not possible, these things are already predetermined, they're ordained from a king or a god or this or whatever the case may be, then it's more difficult for the general populace to make the leap to say, oh, I can be the master of my physiology. I can affect change in my psychological outlook. I can, because it's what I am as a human being. And phenomenology, which lends from that, essentially says that no two people see the world the same, because we're all shaped by all of the things that happen to us at every moment.
Right.
So because even if we are identical twins, we're occupying a different space, and I'm seeing it from here and you're seeing it from there. That little shift is difference enough for our perception of the world to be different.
Right.
And therefore the choices that we make and things of that nature. Why is that important for now? Physical educator, all of this philosophical stuff. Experiences shape reality, shapes motivation, shapes attitude. So if you put human beings early on in life in experiences where they hate physical activity, where physical activity is used as punishment, physical activity is used as, oh, this is how you're going to get a scholarship, so high pressure, and not something that, oh, this is my natural, innate right as a living, breathing human being. No one can give me this. This is naturally my gift from nature, from the universe or the creator, however you want to frame it.
Right.
And that's why physical literacy and the underpinnings are very important, because it shapes how we as educators and human beings will look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and the effects that it has.
Right.
We're not serving some sport organization. We're not serving something beyond the human being. We're serving a living, breathing human being and helping them to realize their full potential as a living, breathing human being that can interact with the world, that can affect how their psychological well-being is, their health is.
Right.
You know, and if society's adapted, they can then help to foster that.
Right. And you, like you mentioned, it kind of goes back to that triangle again, you know, with that philosophy, or that motivation, of why you're doing what you're doing. You know, we often focus on the bottom stuff, right? Like, you know, fitness outcomes, or what, you know, what activity am I doing, or what are we gonna? But it kind of comes back to that top piece, you know. Like, if a kid doesn't want to be there, you could give them the best knowledge in the world, and it's not going to stay. I could preach to you all day about, you know, VO2 max and why it's important to have zone 2 training, and, you know, this is going to be good for your health. And the whole time they could continue. If they are not motivated and excited to pay attention and put this in their life, it's not happening. So if you're not focused on that piece of motivation and their philosophy and what drives them, what moves them, what makes them, you know, want to do these things, if you're not focusing on that, you're kind of losing everything else at the bottom anyway. And the other piece I was going to mention before, I'm curious your thoughts, or it kind of, you know, just ties into what you were saying really. But I think about people almost like as not much different than a rock, right? Like the rock, the Palisades, we're right across from the Palisades right now. The Palisades is absolutely shaped by its environment. And now it's a physical being, right? It's a physical thing. And then you can take any rock, whether it's a black sand beach, or whether it's Coney Island, or whether it's sand, whether it's whatever, whether all these different rocks and shapes and whatever. Scientists can take that rock and look at it and look at its traits and learn about what environment it probably went through and stuff like that. And I think human beings are very similar. We're shaped by our environment, no different than a rock. And, you know, and maybe, yeah, we are human, we have some differences, but generally speaking, you are a product of your environment. I can look at, you know, if I travel the world, I can probably immediately identify somebody who's from Brooklyn, you know? And how, why, I don't know, the way they walk, the way they talk, their New York hat, the Timbs, the conversation, the whatever. Yeah, but you could pick up on it. There's traits that people get because of their environment. And whether it's your household, whether it's New York City where you live, whether it's whatever. And yeah, but you know, I just felt like I wanted to mention that piece because that was a train of thought that I had recently, and it made me think what you were saying about the environment. But so motivation, right? Tying into what could potentially motivate kids. What do you think? And it could be adults, you know, this is not just, we're both physical educators, so the conversation goes to kids. But this is for everybody, right? So what could potentially like motivate someone or demotivate someone? What type of experiences should we try to foster and create? And what could maybe potentially help their motivation?
I love this question. I pride myself totally on hearing whoever comes into my classroom say, 100% of your students were physically active. That brings the total joy to me. Now, to your specific question of motivation, how do I achieve that? Now this is where the split happens. Because some people who are very rigid in what they deem to be physical education or deem to be, will say that unless it's meeting this, and that, then the kid should not be allowed to do so. So I'll summarize it in one word: autonomy. By providing children autonomy, by providing adults autonomy, meaning choice over what activity they're doing, that will 100% increase motivation. Then once you get someone active, once you get them in it, then you can begin to direct their efforts towards skill development, towards fitness development, towards engaging in a sport, towards trying things in a more systematic and rigid way, which we know 100% leads to skill development, skills outcome. But I don't think we can start there with most people. I think our society is so divorced from that discipline being put onto the normal person seems like a weight that they cannot lift. That's like bringing someone into the gym and immediately starting them at 225.
Right. Right.
You know, but if you now say, we're in the gym, actually explore, see what captures your attention. And being comfortable with that, being comfortable that if the damn person chooses to do something that totally exists outside of your understanding of what movement is, then go through the checklist. Are they moving? Are they enjoying it? Are they active? And if that's the case, I think that should be like the goal. And from there, building to more targeted, specific training stuff. Because then once you enjoy movement, then now you're just now helping the person to find a discipline that they can now outlet that movement in to develop a skill to a higher degree. But most people cannot start there.
Yeah.
And that's why we recommend at the early ages that it's free play, that the kids just go and be at the it's physical activity, not physical education. Physical education starts at a certain age for that specific reason. It has to do
And
with
when you say young, what age? Like pre-K?
From birth.
Right.
All the way, I believe, through kindergarten. I know now there's a push going in the other direction, but I think that push is not in the right place. I think that's just based on our society's need to control human beings even earlier and earlier and earlier.
But all the way till kindergarten.
Right.
There is no, first off, so we have outcomes, right? We have our scope and sequence, we have things we have to teach, and there isn't any for kindergarten.
Right.
Or
For
pre-K. I meant to say for
Right.
pre-K. But yeah, even up to kindergarten,
Right.
you know, there has to be those playful experiences.
Because ultimately, and going back to that phenomenology piece, if we understand that a person's outlook is based on the experiences they had, if I increase the amount of positive experiences you have with movement, your association with physical activity begins to be one of joy and happiness and wanting to. That's a boost in motivation. You know, then later on, as you involve yourself in one or two movement disciplines, I think you get, I don't know.
Go for it.
Right, like, if you involve yourself in any movement discipline deeply enough, you basically understand all other movement disciplines. You're not going to be proficient or even competent in all, but the same level of attention to detail, repetitive, consistent work towards a goal, reflection, refining, and adapting is the same for all disciplines. So once you are able to get someone in one, you can then now get someone in multiple things because they understand that process. But the first layer is just positive connection with physical activity, positive connection with our body. So you're not ashamed of your body. Think about back to the religious piece, how many religions, and I'm not gonna name any of them, teach us to be shameful of our body, to feel shame towards it. So getting kids early on, no matter what their ability, and now you create an environment where you're constantly rewarding effort. Great effort, Tommy. Great job, Billy. Fahim, good job doing whatever the case is, right? Because now they're receiving that versus now I have a rigid mindset. If they're not skipping with a mature pattern, or if they want to now choose to play with the Legos over there, now I'm gonna like, even if I pretend that I'm not upset, but if I'm sending that energy because my philosophy, my understanding says that's not what I deem, but you know, like it's more than just, if we are being holistic, it's more than the physical. So if someone is there having a great time and emotionally they feel, so another piece, and I'll stop here.
No, you're good.
Recently, one of the students who, when I met him last year, would always come in and read. And I would allow him to do it. And then when we moved the activity to something that he wanted to do, he would join in. Graduating this year, gets involved now in the entire PE class. Says, I'm gonna miss you a lot, Mr. Ronny. And this is a kid that if I come in with my, I'm a college football player, college track star mentality, that kid is now not even in my radar. That kid, you need to be fixed. You need some running. You need some. Then I cannot make that connection. But now understanding all movements, all, now, no matter their effort, I can, without lying, say to them, good effort, because I understand that from whatever you are, whatever you're now doing that is physically, I should celebrate that. Because the goal is increase physical activity. It's not develop an athlete. You know, that's a completely different thing.
And of course, someone's physical literacy journey might be that they enjoy being an athlete and want to be developed an athlete. But that's this whole individual approach and the autonomy and getting to choose. Those that want to go the athletic approach can. There's still a place for that. And those that don't. I used to, this will be the first time I think I get this story, which is good, alive. But my first job, I've told you this one before, Harvey Milk High School. And for those that don't know, it's a transfer high school catered to the LGBTQ community. So very unique high school. If you don't know what a transfer school is, you could look it up. But so, you know, the students are there, and we have a couple of, you know, trans female students in the class, and they used to say, you know, oh, these are a bunch of man games that you're playing, you know, and we're not playing any man games. And I said, you know, it's interesting. First off, it's ultimate frisbee, so I didn't know how masculine that was, but I guess it is, you know, and at least to your point of perspective, at least even to them it was, right? So regardless of what I think. But I said, you know, it's interesting. I saw after school you guys were at the Kiki, you were doing a little voguing, right? And voguing is physical education. They're like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I'm like, well, you're looking at it as team sport. I said, it's movement. That's absolutely physical education. I'll tell you what, you're all going to create a halftime show. You're going to create the dance. You're going to dance and practice on the side. And when we break for ultimate frisbee, you're going to come out and do the show. And that experience at Harvey Milk High School really taught me a lot. And it helped remind me about the piece of, you know, motivation being important. But so now we have people motivated. Oh, and even before I dive into the piece of confidence, because I want to touch on that too, those are a little more philosophical, but not as much. But I have this idea of, and even for adults, is exercise dating, right? So I want to create something on my website, and it's free. It's not like I'm trying to sell something, but like where there's, you know, specifically for New York City, with a bunch of places kind of like highlighted and all the different activities and places you can go and whatever. But people should, in the beginning, if you don't have, if you reflect on your life and you say, I've never enjoyed movement and I've never liked movement and I never had a good connection to movement, well, you know, you might want to explore. That might be your first starting ground, and finding a place that you can find some enjoyment in movement. And then it's just like dating, you're trying to find a match, because you know how you're wired and how you're built and your experiences are going to have to match the person that's going to be your partner. And it's the same thing with dating. You're trying to find that good match for you. Some people are more rigid. Some people may want more of that structure, fitness, and enjoy it and thrive off of it. There's others who might say like, no, I'm like a liberal type of mover. Maybe I'm a dancer. I want to be in the outdoors. I want to do trail running. I don't want to be inside. But you're going to have to date. You're going to date around with movement. And guess what? Along that dating journey, you're going to find a lot of things that you don't like. And then one day you find a match. And it's kind of, you know, maybe not always that simple, but just the idea of exercise dating and having a period of time where you're exploring until you find a little bit of a match. And what are your thoughts? Like, is that a good?
That's a great strategy, because that's exactly, the person has to find something that they can fall in love with. They have to. I love the concept of dating, because then now we bring in, falling in love. You have to fall in love with yourself, to the extent that now you find things that make you love yourself. And a good movement practice, and I term it that way because to be the most vague and the most encompassing, because under a movement practice could be a discipline, could be a sport, could be anything that allows you to expend your energy and be creative and explore yourself and the environment around you. So I think it's a great idea, especially for like you said. Unfortunately, I had many administrators who told me that they had horrible experiences in physical education, and their connection with movement was not the best. So something like that would be perfect for an adult who's an educator and affecting the lives of thousands and thousands of kids. And although they're not directly the movement person, they're the making decisions within that entire institution, which then in turn, if their relationship to movement is that it's horrible, what decisions they're going to make when they come down the turnpike about recess, PE, to allocate the funding, space, things of that nature. So, I think it's a great idea because you got to give people choices. There's not a one way. There's multiple ways to do the same thing.
Yeah, and it has to be, because there's two ways you can, I think, motivate people: fear and love. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty more, but like generally speaking,
but you're
that's
bringing
your
it
spectrum.
down to the very you can't divide it deeper than that.
Right.
So yes.
And you could use some fear factor. If you don't do this, you're going to have cancer when you get older.
Right.
You don't do this, you're going to have metabolic disease. You're going to die a horrible death. There are some fear factors, and some people that'll motivate people. But at the end of the day, it's not enough. I think what we're learning is people already know. People do know the value of movement. For the most, anybody who looks to, if you are thinking about it, if you just Google it, you could just Google benefits of movement, research studies, and everything's going to point to all the great podcasts I listen to nowadays too. I mean, I like to say mine is one of, no, but there's great guys who I look up to, and women as well. There's one called Found My Fitness. There's Peter Attia, the Drive podcast, Huberman Lab. But all these really good scientists who know the stuff well, they're all telling you movement is it. And these are people who are not a movement background.
Right.
John Rady, he was a professor of psychiatry.
Yep.
Huberman, he's a neuroscientist that specializes in visual, the eye stuff. Peter Attia was a doctor and something else. All these people are different fields, and they're telling you movement. So I think it's very clear. There's no debating the fact that movement's going to enhance your lifespan and your health span. We're very clear of that. But yet still people don't get up and do it. And one of the questions I asked John Rady was why do you think? And I brought my piece, but he said no, because it's hard work. Why do people don't do it? Because 5 days a week, or 6, 7 days, it becomes it's a lifestyle. So if you're doing this every day, he's it's much easier to just take the pill. Why would I go about this whole lifestyle if I could just take a pill? Everybody's searching for the pill, but it comes back to the lifestyle. You have to change the lifestyle, and the only way you're going to do that, in my opinion, is through love. It's going to be through passion. If you don't love this, you're going to fight it. And that'll be a whole nother stress factor that you'll die from. You'll die just from the stress of thinking about going to the workout. So you have to be motivated through love. You gotta find something you're passionate about. And if you don't have it yet, date around, you'll find it. There's gonna be a way that you move that you can. But that ties into another piece of confidence, and I think they kind of go a little bit of hand in hand. How could somebody potentially develop their confidence? So let's say I find something that I'm oh, this looks kind of nice. When I was young, I remember a story I just told the other day. I remember, it's funny, I love to dance now, and you know me as someone who likes to dance, but I was shy to dance. I was very, very nervous to dance. I used to tap my foot, and somebody came over to me one time, one of the adults in the room. He's like, get up and dance, what are you doing? I was like, no, I don't really want to. He's like, what do you mean you don't want to? I see you tapping your foot. He's like, I know you want to get up and dance. And I was like, no, you know, every excuse under the sun. He's like, I'm not giving you an option. Get up off the chair. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, bad thing, I don't know. He's like, get up off the chair and dance. For me, it happened to work in that scenario. That was like a big icebreaker for me. But, you know, I didn't have so I wanted to dance, but I didn't have the confidence in the beginning. So let's say I see something, I'm like, that looks kind of cool. I like it, but I'll never be able to do that. Like, how can I develop that confidence to get to do, you know, people watch you do the handstands in the workshop. They're like, wow, that's so cool. I'd love to be able to do it, but I can't do that. Everybody, I can't. How can someone develop that confidence to then start to maybe trust movement and feel that they can be competent in movement?
I believe is more difficult once you're older and as an adult, because now you have to unlearn first and then relearn.
Right.
If you're already at the adult level and you've built up many experiences of negative, like you had coaches, adults, other peers who made fun of you when you did a certain activity,
Right.
that is negative reinforcement. Some people shut down. They shut down, they don't want to do it ever again. So I think one of the ways at the early ages to build confidence is constant praising of effort. Of effort, not necessarily outcomes. Because you want to praise the actions that lead to the outcome, not simply the outcome. Because if you engage, any coach will tell you, if I can get you to repeat this movement consistently and be open to reflection and correction, you're going to go to whatever your endowment allows you to go to. Confidence is built through repetition. It's built through positive affirmations of skills achieved, positive affirmations of effort given to do something. We live in a society that exalts the expert. So and in today's world, with us constantly comparing ourselves on social media to other people who are only putting up their highlights and not the process, it can debilitate a lot of confidence, because now I would never measure up to that. Not understanding that no one is born doing those things. That is achieved through what I spoke to earlier. Once you devote yourself to one discipline and you understand the whole going from lacking competence completely to becoming competent, to becoming skilled, to then reaching some level of mastery, you can repeat that process for any other discipline. Because you've now gained the confidence from doing it in one area. Physical education is positioned in a way that, because it can be low stakes, we can create an environment where we build everyone's confidence. No matter what movements they're doing, so long as they're safe, it's conducive to the learning process, not taken away from somebody else. For adults, is getting out. I think the movement that you are embarking on of dating, different physical activities can foster that through bringing like-minded people who are maybe at similar levels of competence, and with one person or two people there who can then reinforce, great job, great effort, thank you for showing up, thank you for trying, like, you know, a very overwhelmingly so that's what gets people going. Even the pros, they respond to the crowd going wild. That's praise. That's praise for the effort that you're giving, the catch that you made, the kick that you were able to execute, whatever the case. You know, so we all need that. We all need that, you know, until we can learn to give that to ourselves. But that's, I think, on the self-development journey of self-confidence and self-efficacy, that is the pinnacle where you can applaud yourself. So now you do not need anyone or anything to get you going. But I think that, so if we're going to talk about like what is the outcome of like motivation and confidence, those first two attributes, I think that is the pinnacle where you can on your own applaud yourself for your effort and therefore continue to engage in that activity and improve without needing the external validation. No one gets there on their own. So I'm not selling no lone wolf thing. I did not get there on my own. I had tremendous validation in physical education class. I did do 2 sports, track and football, and was able to reach a high level in both. So I have tons of experiences to draw back from, like, oh, I was told I was great.
Right.
I was told that my effort is worthy and that I can go to another level, and that,
Right.
you know, so to now sit here and say anyone can no.
Right.
It does take a village. It does
Right.
take, at the first levels, people building you up to that point where now you can do it for yourself. But
Yeah.
I don't think anyone reaches that point on their own.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, some important things to consider. You know, I think, what was the number? It was 20 hours of practice. So some people, there's some research that'll support you'll need at least 20 hours of practice before you can feel like you are getting better at this thing and notice that you're, you know, a little bit better. So those first 20 hours are gonna be pretty hard, right? Like, you're gonna have 20 hours of practice with this thing that, at least, right, where you're feeling not as competent, and you're gonna have to overcome a lot. So, you know that there's a light at the end of that tunnel. Know that you keep practicing it. There is a number there to kind of surpass. But in that first beginning, especially, having people who are applauding you. So I guess finding good environments, you know, finding good coaches, finding good teachers, and, you know, many people do these like home workouts and stuff. I think we're social beings. I think you got to get out of the house. And I think you need a team. You know, like you said, it takes a village. So, you know, you're going to join an environment that's giving you that positive reinforcement. You know, I'm wearing the climbing gym shirt now, but I know it's a very inclusive environment, very supportive environment. And there's many others out there. And some certain activities might lend itself more to it, which is why people might gravitate towards them. Like yoga could be a very welcoming, right? Like, you know, we're here to support you. We're doing this here. So like maybe that's why people do gravitate towards that more in society nowadays or whatever. But I think you can find that in anything. Like if you find an interest in something, you can find a good coach that'll support you, whether it was dance, weightlifting, football, whatever. But yeah, that beginning's going to be a bit of a journey, and finding that right environment for you to thrive is super important, and getting that praise. And as an adult, that would be very hard. I often say that kids are like wet concrete and adults are like solid concrete. When the concrete is wet, you can mold it. And that's why they say an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, where I think we need to start with kids in schools, because we need to be able to shape, you know, and create these positive experiences. But many adults are solid concrete, and it's going to take an axe and chisel. Now, you still can change.
Yeah, oh, of course.
You absolutely could still change, just knowing that there's a little larger of an obstacle,
course.
You know. But I think those are two major motivation and confidence, something people don't talk about enough. But then the last two pieces, physical competence and knowledge and understanding, you know, we could dive into them slightly. But, you know, now that I'm motivated, I'm starting to feel good. I feel like I'm in the right environment. What can I do to develop my physical competence? Are there certain movements that people should be doing? Is there something that everybody should be doing? Does it matter? Could it be anything? Or do you have any thoughts to share on physical competence?
Definitely. I think that when it comes to developing a great human character, walking, quadrupedal movements, throwing, catching, right? The quadrupedal movements lead to climbing. The walking leads to you feeling invigorated, and there's a lot of research into how walking is how courage and the signal that it sends to your brain, because you're moving forward. So it's reaffirming to your mental aptitude that I have a right to be here. I have a right to move forward and venture into the world. So the act of locomotion, so obviously walking, jogging, running,
Swimming,
climbing, very, very integral to you feeling competent, because that's your mobility, your ability to interact with the environment. So, and that's why those are some of the first things. The baby learns to move his head, from moving his head to rolling, from rolling to crawling, from crawling to attempting to walk, first steps, and then the rest goes on. The crawling, that quadrupedal movement translates to then being able to climb, because you're using quadrupedal movements to climb. You're coordinating your body. So I think there's a lot to be said for locomotion. Locomotion is very pivotal to teach early on, because that leads to independence. And then think about how pivotal it is late in life. The people who make it to be quite elderly will all tell you, if they're able to be mobile, they're able to be independent, potentially live by themselves. Once you lose your mobility, now you are dependent on someone's or a system's mercy. You know, obviously we try to create environments that are more inclusive to people with wheelchairs and other implements to help and facilitate their mobility. But to have it within yourself, if you are endowed with that, because obviously there's rare but diseases where people are not able to. But if for the majority of the human species, locomotion are going to be foundational movement skills. That's how you are going to be able to move about in your environment. And then from there, obviously, you know, things that have to do with grabbing, throwing, because that manipulation, you know.
Right. The just because I want to get it, because you were so good at this, but elementary PE, where we break it, we're teaching the fundamentals. So I think you're very good at the fundamentals. And, you know, people, just for adults to know this too, again, just because you're 25 doesn't mean you're at a 25-year-old movement. It's almost like reading, right?
Yes.
Like you can be reading at like a kindergarten level. So fundamentals are for anyone who's new to the journey, right? Not just for any, but locomotion, just a couple of the different, there was skip, leap, jump, hop, like some of the, and what's the difference between like a leap, a skip, a jump? You know, just a couple of those little ones.
No, for sure. So whenever you're talking about walking is an upright movement in which you're placing one foot in front of another. Your foot is not going above your ankle. Once your foot goes above your ankle, that's considered a jog. Once your knee is getting closer to your hip, that's considered a run. Once your knee is getting up to your hip or higher, you're sprinting. For jumping is taking off from 1 or 2 feet and then landing on 1 or 2 feet. For leaping is taking off from 1 foot but then landing on the opposite foot. So if you don't land on the opposite foot, it's a jump. If you land on the opposite foot after taking off from 1, that is a leap. Hopping is taking off from 1 foot and landing on that same foot. So hopping, although sometimes people like to say, oh, bunny hop, and then you see the person doing 2 feet, hopping is only on 1 feet. If we're gonna get technical, hopping can only happen on 1 feet, and it's that you're taking off from that same foot and landing on that same foot. Then when we get into skipping is combining stepping and hopping, because you have to take a step and then on that same foot, hop up, land on that same foot again, switch, and that alternation we call skipping. When you're doing galloping, now the lead foot stays the lead foot, and the trail foot remains as the trail foot. The trail foot always chases the lead foot. So it's like a forward slide. Now that brings us to sliding. Sliding is when now your body is horizontal to a plane and you're moving sideways. So those type of movements lend themselves to a lot of sports like basketball, like football, linebackers and things of that nature, who are usually using slide techniques to move more efficiently from side to side without losing their coordination, balance. So those movements of locomotion are the bedrock of any sports that involve some form of locomotion, and most sports do. Unless you're golfing, there's no locomotion in golfing. But for most sport, you are going to have to move in some capacity from point A to point B. So that's why those are very foundational pieces to get you in the game. You know?
And I love it because, you know, a lot of times people are thinking running, and nowadays it's just very linear. But I had Lee Taft on my on an episode, and he talks a lot about multi-directional running, right? So like so now we're talking about more dynamic settings. And when you're in that dynamic setting and I have to react to the environment or an opponent or something, I might have to do like a skip step. I might have to do this hop. I might land, go to jump, but I can't jump because something's in the way, or if I'm trail running, right? And I have to readjust mid-step. So now like these types of locomotion are the foundational movements to really help give you, I almost think about it, and I said this in the last episode, but like critical thinking. You're kind of like a critical mover. Like you're able to react to the environment as opposed to just being this linear runner. And I think people could benefit from more dynamic running and more multi-directional running and more of, maybe including some of these things in a routine or a workout routine so that when you do go, because I would say that people should, complement, if they do weightlifting, they should complement it with something outside. And so let's say I'm doing ultimate frisbee. I use that example today. I use that one a lot recently, but maybe a couple of days in the week when I'm in the gym, I'm doing maybe some skips and not just squats, but maybe I'm doing some of these other things. And then when I get out onto the field of ultimate frisbee, I'm able to react better. I'm able to respond more dynamically. I'm not so rigid where it's going to lend itself to an injury.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right.
And then the other portion that I didn't mention of locomotion, crawling. So bear crawls, crab crawls are very pivotal to developing athletic ability because now that's going to increase your overall coordination, your core stability, and your ability to move limbs in a coordinated way. And that lends itself, again, to a multitude of different activities and aptitude. And it's more so what it does to your brain and its ability to now interact and respond, as you're alluding to the environment and the tasks that the environment demands. And the more your movement repertoire is increased, or what we can call high levels of physical literacy, will make you more likely to not injure yourself or hurt yourself while engaging in dynamic settings or the day-to-days of life. Somebody asks you to lift something, move something, run up a hill, run down a hill, and if you don't have those access points because you don't have that movement repertoire, your body will naturally select the movement and now you trip, you fall,
Right.
things because it's not there.
Right.
It's not there. It's just not there.
And I love that you mentioned the importance of walking too.
Yes.
Another big one that everybody, I think is essential. I love that you made the connection between, I actually read, it made me think of something I read recently about anxiety. When someone's feeling anxious, if they walk, and it immediately, because of that forward progression, that almost freedom in a sense that you were saying. But so those are some fundamental movements. Are there any activity category buckets that you can think of? So this might be more my wheelhouse at the secondary level, maybe, but just to get it on camera, right? So I have some fundamentals. What are some activity categories? For example, like invasion games. So there's this category of invasion games that can lend themselves to, a lot of similar transferable skills. Are there any other buckets?
I like to use the movement education framework because I feel that it's the most comprehensive from my vantage point. So the way that it's broken up, it's educational gymnastics. So now from the gymnastics, you will truly learn fitness because most of gymnastics are calisthenic exercises that you have to repeat in order to improve. So it's like built-in fitness, but being fun because you're using apparatuses, rings, things of that nature which may mask some of the repetitive nature of it. Then you have educational games which lend themselves, so now you have basketball, so dribbling with your hands, throwing, catching, and using your hand-eye coordination. Soccer, which now kicking, receiving, striking towards a goal, foot-eye coordination, so now your lower half of your body. Then floor hockey, so now you're including a long implement. If I had to throw something else in there that's not included in that framework, it would be a racket activity to now complement the long implement on the floor. And then you have educational dance, which then will include creative dances, line dances, and things. And I think from those three areas, all other things branch. I don't know too many things that are missing from that, other than now there's no bicycling, there's no kayaking, and all these outdoor adventures. But from those movement repertoires that you will gain from those three, you can then take that and transfer that to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's going to be a combination. Right.
Rowing, right? Like it's kind of all.
Right.
Yeah. When I love to kind of nerd out on the movement stuff. So there's so many frameworks out there. That's a framework. Our Scope and Sequence has a bit of a framework. Physical literacy has a bit of a framework. They have a category of construction.
Yep.
You know, I think it was like locomotion, manipulatives, you know, a lot of the same way that we do. But so when I'm thinking of like categories of movement that people might tend to gravitate towards and like, so sports and games, I definitely throw that in there. And then I divide that like the way the Scope and Sequence does. So invasion games, so that's anytime you have to invade an opponent's territory and score. Now there are differences. I like the fact that you said, you know, hockey's the long manipulative, and soccer you're using more lower body. So there are differences, but there's a lot of similarities between those invasion type of games where you're, there is that locomotive component and multi-directional running and offense and defense and whatever. Then you have net and wall games, you know, your pickleball, your tennis, your badminton, you know, usually 2 to 4 players, something like that. Volleyball can be a little bit different there. But fielding and striking, things like baseball, cricket, target games, things like archery, you know, or anything else in that realm. We said golf and all that. So those are your sports and games broken up. Then I think about rhythm and dance. You already said that one too. And that could be, oh my God, that could go on and on. I love, love, love dance so much for the creative component. When you talk about the brain, we talked about that before, I think there's, between martial arts and dance, I think there's no better activity for you challenging your brain and maintaining your brain's capacity. There's always a new dance move out there to learn, and it's always going to challenge your brain. But so rhythm and dance is going to be a category. You mentioned outdoor pursuits. I kind of put that one maybe in its own bucket. People tend to like, you know, there's people who love the outdoors. I categorize this one, you don't see in schools as much, so it usually doesn't make the cut, but I put rough and tumble. So wrestling, you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, martial arts. So it doesn't make the cut because in schools there's non-contact, so we're not allowed to have rough and tumble. But it's very fundamental to human nature as well. And there's a lot of people that gravitate towards that. And then I would categorize strength training kind of like in its own, or weightlifting, and you know, strongman, or all those. There's some people who like the weightlifting side of things, and there might be benefits for, there are benefits for all of us to do some form of resistance training, but it doesn't always have to be like weightlifting, like a gym. And I feel like those are its own categories of sports. Bodybuilding is a sport, Olympic lifting is a sport, strongman is a sport, and those have their own kind of. So I've kind of categorized in that way, sports and games in those 4, rhythm and dance, outdoor pursuits, rough and tumble, and what was the last one I just said? It was rough and tumble, right? I think I got them all there. There might be one I'm missing, but it gives the people an idea of, you know, what might be a match for me. You know, when I'm thinking about this exercise dating, you might think like, oh, I kind of gravitate towards martial arts. I gravitate towards the outdoors. I gravitate towards sports and games in a competitive nature. I gravitate towards, and now it kind of just helps with your dating process of who you are and kind of what you might like, you know. So yeah, the last piece was knowledge and understanding. But I feel like you can add, you know, anything you want to it, but I feel like that one's a little easier. Once people kind of have the motivation, the confidence, and the physical competence, nowadays knowledge is abundant. But is there anything you want to add to knowledge and understanding?
Right. I just think the more you know about the human condition, the more you know about yourself. You're a human being. And physical literacy gives us the justification, foundation, philosophical basis from which we can devolve a great deal of our understanding, a great deal of our knowledge seeking to better improve our lives on an individual level, and from that individual level on a collective level. Because the more human beings are physically literate, I wholeheartedly believe, the better our world will become. I have views that, a lot of evil stems from weakness. And a lot of that weakness stems from lack of physical activity and sedentary behaviors, which lend themselves to nihilistic outlooks and, cowardly behavior. So some of my personal views on that, I think that, it's very important that we learn more about the human condition and what the value of living a physically literate life is, and how that will undoubtedly lead to a higher quality of life for any human being who embraces such a way of life.
Yeah, I think because that's the ending of it there, right? Is to value and take responsibility. And really knowing that can help someone to value it. Because then it kind of goes full cycle, right? Because the more I know about it, the more I know how important this is, the more motivated I now might be to actually go and do it. And there's an abundance of knowledge pointing towards the value of movement nowadays. I mean, it's everywhere. If you just look, it'll be super easy to find. Mind, body, spirit, everything. I love what you said about getting really deep there. Cowardly behavior, weakness stems from, a lot of, all really, really good points. So we hit the bulk of what I wanted to. Before we start to close it out, is there any, not that you have to have anything you want to add, but I like to open the floor in case there's something you prepared or maybe didn't get to share, or is there anything you want to add to the convo that you might not have already done so, or you feel pretty good?
I'll add something here. I believe that movement, and this is going to be sensational,
right?
To in on purpose be maybe controversial even. Movement is the end all be all. Everything that we do is mitigated through movement. There is nothing higher than movement. Our over intellectualizing our existence has led us to the brink of wiping human beings off the face of the earth.
Right. Yeah.
When we were living more close to heart as a species, our species thrives for hundreds of thousands of years. This shift towards hyper-intellectualization has disconnected us from our true essence as living, breathing human beings. So I believe that there needs to be a radical shift back towards being earthy, having our feet firmly on the ground, getting out of the clouds a little bit and back into our heaven, which is earth. This is the only heaven that we know for a fact, that we can feel, that we can see, that we can collectively affect here and now. And movement is that. Physical activity is that.
I absolutely love it. And you make me think too, without movement, right? If everything was stagnant, you'd literally have nothing, right? That's like if you believe in the Big Bang, or I don't know whether it is or not, but that would be everything previous to the Big Bang probably, right? You're just talking about that's it, nothing, just nothingness.
Right.
Nothing exists without movement. It's all giving and taking. Everything's in flux. Everything's moving. So, if philosophy-wise, it's definitely the essence of life. And I love what you said about Earth, here and now. I mentioned a piece earlier about handball, and I used those exact words. I said I feel like I need to come back to Earth. I'm like, what? What's a I use this analogy too in another podcast, but I said, I wonder if, and it's a thought that's a little out there, but aliens, our typical view of aliens, small, slim body, huge head, is really ourselves coming to visit us.
Right.
Right, in the future. Like, if you think about it, but like, you know, how can I come back to here? How can I come back to Earth? How can I re-involve my body and be here? Like, my head's just in the clouds all day. I'm getting this huge, you know, and you wonder why people are anxious, why you're depressed. You know, I'm a mover and I feel it, and I, you know, because just everything's electronic nowadays. I'm like, wow, I need to come back to Earth. And they say, oh, what helps kids with ADHD? Why is ADHD such a big problem nowadays? Well, if you strap everybody to a chair, what are you going to want to do?
Right.
I'm literally like, right, what are you going to, you're going to want to move, right? And what are some of the fixes? It's like, oh, movement, being outdoors. Oh, so you mean like being a human being?
Being, right,
Like,
right.
you said, oh, the recipe to, you mean how you're killing me is to just be a human? Or you say, like, you're saying ADHD is the problem, or the strapping of the chair is the problem? It's like, we need to be outdoors, and that makes people feel good. These dynamic environments you're hearing, we're outdoors now, you hear the birds, you hear things, you hear stuff over there. Why? Because it's movement. The tree is moving, the wind is blowing. The other day I almost felt a little claustrophobic. I wonder if it's why I love movement so much. But in a space I was in, it was like quiet, dead air. You know, you start to think about it, it's taking away movement.
Yep.
Air is movement.
Yep.
The tree is movement.
Yep.
If you watch a plant for long enough, it moves.
Yep.
You know, and you might have to watch it and fast forward, but the plant moves.
Right.
You know, and it's surrounding yourself around life.
Yes.
And to me, life is movement. And but yeah, this was a solid conversation. Everything exactly why I always want to bring you on. Absolutely love it. You know, thank you for today. I feel good about closing it here. You?
I feel great. Thank you, Brother Anthony. I appreciate you
Yo,
so much.
Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Like,